Bjorn Fleshweaver could reshape living flesh with nothing but his bare hands, straightening crooked bones, healing disfigured faces, and mending wounds that should have been fatal. His touch could restore what disease and violence had destroyed, making him the most sought-after healer in 3 kingdoms. But when Jarl Magnus accused him of unholy sorcery and had his hands chopped off, they discovered that flesh remembers its master, and some connections run deeper than bone. Bjorn Fleshweaver had been born with the strangest gift in the north, the ability to reshape living tissue as easily as a potter molds clay. His touch could straighten bones twisted by disease, smooth scars that disfigured faces, and even coax severed limbs to regrow given enough time and patience. The gift manifested during his childhood when he accidentally healed his sister's club foot by simply holding it while she slept. The deformed bones straightened, the muscles strengthened, and by morning she could walk normally for the first time in her life. Word of the miracle spread quickly, and soon desperate families traveled vast distances seeking the boy who could reshape flesh. As Bjorn matured, so did his understanding of the gift. He learned that living tissue responded to his will like wet clay, becoming malleable under his touch and holding whatever shape he desired once he withdrew his hands. But more importantly, he discovered that his power worked best when guided by compassion. Flesh responded more readily to healing intent than to selfish desires. His workshop in Iron Fjord became a place of pilgrimage for the deformed, diseased, and injured. Warriors whose faces had been ruined by enemy blades, children born with twisted spines, mothers whose bodies had been broken by difficult births, all found restoration through Bjorn's gentle touch. But such power inevitably attracted fear alongside gratitude. Jarl Magnus Iron Fist ruled Iron Fjord through traditional strength and conventional wisdom, believing that anything he couldn't understand represented a potential threat to his authority. Bjorn's gift disturbed him because it operated outside normal human limitations, achieving results that seemed to mock the natural order. His suspicion deepened when he realized that Bjorn's patients often became more loyal to their healer than to their jarl. People who had been restored by the Fleshweaver's touch spoke of him with reverence normally reserved for gods, creating a rival power structure that Magnus couldn't control or comprehend. "It's not natural," Magnus declared during a council meeting, his voice heavy with paranoid certainty. "No mortal man should command such power over flesh and bone. What he does, it's sorcery, pure and simple." His advisors murmured nervous agreement, though many had family members who owed their lives to Bjorn's healing touch. Fear of their jarl's anger outweighed gratitude for the Fleshweaver's gifts, creating the political consensus Magnus needed to act against what he saw as a supernatural threat. "The man must be stopped," Magnus announced. "His unnatural abilities corrupt the proper order of things. If the gods intended people to change their flesh, they would have given everyone such power." The attack came while Bjorn was performing his most delicate work, attempting to restore sight to a child born blind by carefully reshaping the malformed structures within her eyes. The procedure required absolute concentration and precise control, making him completely vulnerable to the armed men who burst into his workshop. "Bjorn Fleshweaver," Magnus announced, surrounding the healer with steel-wielding warriors. "You stand accused of practicing unholy sorcery, of wielding power that belongs to gods alone, and of corrupting natural law through forbidden arts." Bjorn looked up from his patient, his hands still glowing with the subtle energy that guided his gift. "I heal the sick and restore the broken. How is mercy unholy? How is healing corruption?" "Because flesh should not bend to mortal will," Magnus replied, drawing his blade. "Because you make a mockery of divine authority by claiming power over life itself, and because your influence grows stronger while mine grows weaker." The child on the table whimpered as Bjorn's concentration broke. her half-healed eyes still clouded, but showing flickers of light they had never before perceived. The interrupted healing left her trapped between blindness and sight, experiencing both conditions simultaneously. Magnus's judgment was swift and calculated to send a message throughout his domain. Rather than killing Bjorn outright, which might have created a martyr, he chose a punishment specifically designed to destroy the source of the Fleshweaver's power. "Since your hands are the tools of your sorcery," Magnus declared, "we will remove them. Without hands you cannot touch. Without touch you cannot corrupt flesh. Live handless, and remember that some abilities are too dangerous for mortals to possess." The amputation was performed publicly, ensuring that everyone who had benefited from Bjorn's healing witnessed the destruction of their benefactor's gift. Magnus used a heated blade to cauterize the wounds, preventing death from blood loss while ensuring maximum pain and permanent disability. As his hands fell to the ground, Bjorn felt something fundamental tear within him, not just physical tissue, but the connection that had linked his consciousness to living flesh throughout the known world. The severed bond created agony beyond anything mere amputation could cause. But in that moment of ultimate loss, Bjorn discovered something unexpected. The connection hadn't been destroyed, merely changed. Without hands to channel his gift through touch, it began manifesting through proximity, emotion, and most dangerously, through his accumulated knowledge of how flesh responded to will. Recovery from the amputation took months, during which Bjorn learned to navigate the world without the hands that had defined his entire identity. But more importantly, he discovered that his gift hadn't died with his severed limbs. It had evolved into something far more powerful and terrifying. Where he had once needed direct touch to reshape flesh, he now found that strong emotion could influence living tissue from a distance. Rage could cause tumors to grow, despair could trigger rapid aging, and hatred could twist bones into painful configurations that defied natural anatomy. The first sign of his transformed power came when Magnus himself began experiencing mysterious changes. The jarl's sword arm gradually weakened as muscles atrophied for no medical reason. His face developed asymmetrical growths that no healer could explain. Most disturbing of all, his bones began shifting position, creating chronic pain that no remedy could address. But Bjorn's revenge extended beyond his primary tormentor. Every person who had witnessed his mutilation and done nothing to intervene began experiencing their own flesh rebellion. Old wounds reopening, scars spreading like diseases, and previously healthy tissue developing inexplicable deformities. The most psychologically devastating aspect of Bjorn's revenge was how it affected those he had previously healed. Every person whose body he had reshaped began experiencing reversion, their restored flesh slowly returning to its original damaged state as the connection between healer and patient inverted from blessing to curse. Children who had learned to walk with straightened bones felt them gradually twisting back into deformity. Warriors whose battle scars had been erased watched the wounds reappear as if time were flowing backward. Mothers whose birth injuries had been repaired discovered their bodies returning to states of chronic pain and dysfunction. But the cruelest irony was that these reversions occurred slowly, giving victims time to understand what they were losing. They experienced their healings dying by degrees, watching their restored lives crumble as their bodies remembered every injury, every deformity, every imperfection that Bjorn's touch had once corrected. The psychological impact was devastating. People who had lived for years in gratitude to their healer now faced the loss of everything his gift had given them, creating a community-wide crisis of faith in healing, hope, and the possibility of positive change. As Bjorn's power evolved beyond his original healing gift, he began experimenting with flesh manipulation techniques that his former compassion had never allowed him to explore. Without hands to limit his precision, His rage-guided abilities could create changes that were both more subtle and more terrible than simple healing. Magnus's warriors began experiencing bodies that betrayed them in combat, sword arms that cramped at crucial moments, legs that buckled during charges, faces that swelled shut during important negotiations. The changes appeared random to observers, but Bjorn's artistry ensured that each warrior's body failed him at the moment when such failure would cause maximum humiliation and danger. More sophisticated was his work on Magnus himself. Rather than killing the jarl quickly, Bjorn crafted a masterpiece of slow physical degradation that left Magnus conscious and aware as his body systematically betrayed every function he had taken for granted. The jarl's skeleton gradually compressed, making him shorter each month until he stood no taller than a child. His muscles atrophied selectively, leaving him capable of movement but incapable of strength. Most artistically, his face slowly morphed to resemble the deformed children he had prevented Bjorn from healing, creating a mirror of the suffering he had perpetuated through ignorance and fear. Bjorn's workshop, abandoned after his mutilation, became a gallery of living art as he used his evolved abilities to transform his enemies into monuments to his destroyed gift. Each victim represented a different aspect of the injustice he had suffered, their bodies reshaped to tell stories that words could never convey. The warriors who had held him during the amputation found their hands fusing together into useless masses of flesh and bone, experiencing permanent helplessness that mirrored what they had inflicted on him. The advisors who had counseled Magnus to destroy his gift developed mouths that sealed shut, forcing them to experience the voicelessness they had imposed on others. But the masterpiece was Magnus himself, whose transformation into a living embodiment of every deformity he had failed to allow Bjorn to heal served as both artistic statement and practical lesson. The jarl, who had feared unnatural changes, became the ultimate example of how fear could create the very horrors it sought to prevent. As word of Bjorn's handless revenge spread throughout the northern kingdoms, it carried a warning that resonated with every healer, wise woman, and gifted individual who used unusual abilities to serve others. The story demonstrated that destroying the tools of a gift didn't necessarily destroy the gift itself. It might only transform it into something far more dangerous. But more importantly, Bjorn's transformation from compassionate healer to vengeful sculptor illustrated how cruelty toward those who help others can corrupt the very qualities that make such help possible. By destroying his ability to heal through gentle touch, Magnus had created an enemy who understood flesh well enough to make it a weapon. The Fleshweaver's art had evolved from restoration to destruction, from healing to revenge, from the gentle touch of helping hands to the inexorable will of someone who understood that flesh was ultimately just clay waiting to be shaped by whoever possessed sufficient knowledge and motivation. Standing in his abandoned workshop, surrounded by the living sculptures his rage had created, Bjorn understood that he had become something unprecedented. An artist whose medium was the bodies of his enemies, and whose masterpiece was the demonstration that some gifts grow more dangerous when people try to destroy them. Some healers, when their hands are taken, learn to sculpt with their hatred instead. If this tale of ultimate payback moved you, hit that like button and let us know in the comments which part shocked you the most. Subscribe to Time for Payback for more legendary stories where betrayal meets justice, and don't forget to ring that notification bell, because every betrayal has its reckoning, and every story holds the power to change everything. What revenge story should we tell next? Drop your suggestions below. Until next time, remember, karma never forgets.